Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie, and I'm the editorial intern at the British Gestalt Journal. I'm really excited today because I'll get to be interviewing Steffi Bednarek. Steffi, is that how you pronounce your surname?
Yes, it is. Well done.
Okay, great. So I get the great pleasure of interviewing Steffi Bednarek, and she'll be leading our upcoming annual seminar day, which, if you don't know, is taking place online on November 7th. And I'm sure there'll be a link posted with this video about how you can get tickets for that. So Steffi is a Gestalt psychotherapist, trainer, supervisor, climate psychologist, and somatic trauma therapist. She's an associate member of the Climate Psychology Alliance and has published on issues of psychotherapy, climate change, and pre-traumatic trauma. And she was featured in a BBC documentary. She's been head of counseling and mental health in higher education and has worked as an international consultant and trainer for several government organizations, the Council of Europe and the World Health Organization. And I've just been rereading some of your work this morning, Steffi, and I do feel really excited about it, about the way that you write and the confidence with which you write about it. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to interview you today. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, great! Thank you. So to start us off, I was really curious. The title of your upcoming seminar is Necessary Derangement: Living and Working in a Changing Field. Can you talk us through that word, derangement, what it means to you and why it's necessary, particularly now?
I think with the seminar, I don't actually need to send out an invitation for derangement. I think derangement is upon us, whether we want it or not. And so my focus is very in my work, how do we meet it? How do we turn up? Do we allow ourselves to be infected by it? Or do we sort of cling on to a fantasy of some kind of normality that we hope to be able to come back to? So where on that scale are we? And that, I think, makes a really big difference in terms of how I show up in the world, how I meet others that are in the same field as me and that may be deranged by similar things or different things. And really importantly, how I show up as a psychotherapist. My sense is that what in the Western world we've been born into and got accustomed to is quite a toxic form of normality. But that it's difficult to let go of because we know it. And for some of us, it works. For some, it works more than for others. And it's a provocative word, isn't it? Because it comes very close to what we use for madness. And I chose it very deliberately because I think it can be dangerous if it's not contained. It's necessary in older cultures and in mythology. We know that without derangement, without times of when alchemy, like a great blackening, the Nigredo stage, there's no maturation. We will stay in an adolescent place. So this kind of something needs to be broken at periodic intervals in order for us to widen and to grow and to mature. But as I said, we don't tend to choose this, and there can be a breaking down into collapse if it's not contained. And for myself, that's my working definition of trauma, is derangement without containment. And I personally feel that that's where we're at culturally, that our culture is being deranged, but that we have done away with traditional ways that used to provide cultural containment in our hyper-individualized culture. There are hardly any places to go to or to turn to, including stories or cosmologies that hold the kind of derangement in a bigger frame.
glad you touched on the fear and the danger in derangement, because that's how I read it. It is quite a scary word for me. And I heard something about you, like there's an acceptance in coming to terms with derangement, sort of facing it head on instead of pretending that it's not there.
Well, that's the aim, and it is really difficult because it's so painful. Derangement can also be seen as a form of initiation, a rite of passage into something. So where I go into it because I need to be rearranged. I don't want to go into it and come out the same way. And I do really believe that in our times, things need to be rearranged fundamentally.
Yeah, definitely.
And in my personal life, I have experienced this. I have experienced that times of great distress, when I felt held and supported through them, I felt like I have come out rearranged differently. And even though I would have never chosen those heartbreaks, they were important. What I really like is the metaphor of the transition from a caterpillar to a butterfly. So it's the chrysalis, I think you call it.
Yeah.
That provides total containment so that the caterpillar can undergo a complete derangement where it dissolves into a mush. It doesn't exist anymore as a caterpillar. And the individual cells start to rearrange themselves into a whole new being. And so for me, when we talk about COVID or climate change, we often talk about how can we tweak certain things so that basically we can still go about our main business as usual. Maybe have a bamboo toothbrush, or maybe buy a hybrid car or an electric car, but it is not at a fundamental level. And so, yeah, it's again, where do we place ourselves in just keeping things together and waiting it out, hoping for something to come along and fix it. So I need resilience in terms of shielding myself. Or do I go into this and allow something else to work me, and to create space for something else to emerge that I can't know yet what that is until I meet this other.
It makes me think of how do we make those fundamental changes at a sort of societal level? That's what I often feel overwhelmed by. And I was really provoked in your work and excited about some of the things that you talk about communal grief rituals and stuff like that. And I wondered, how do we shift the culture back to perhaps a more communal way of living and being together? And I think I feel hopeless when I think about that question. I think, society is such a machine now.
Yeah. And I share this too. And yet there's also something really exciting in going into this hopeless place. So when you say this, I think of there's a Hindu goddess called Akhilandeshwari. I don't know whether you've come across.
No, I don't think so.
So she's the goddess of wholeness, but her name, I probably pronounce it wrong, but Akhilandeshwari means the one who can never not be broken. We allow ourselves these moments of really being on our knees in this dark place, that suddenly the possibilities are infinite. If I let go of everything that I hoped for, if I just think well, maybe none of it is going to materialize. There's also something incredibly hopeful that can emerge from that. So then anything is possible.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Yeah. It makes me think of a writer talking about the word humble, and to be humble is to be brought down low, to get low to the ground.
Yeah.
And she talked about when she finished her book, she lay on the ground and wept, finished writing her book. And yeah, there's something really evocative in that for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the climate emergency, for me anyway, I often see it as an environmental or an economic or a structural problem. And so I'm curious why it's important that it also becomes like a psychological issue, and why is it important that psychologists and psychotherapists sort of step up to the podium, so to speak, at this moment?
Well, for me, there are two reasons. One is, I think climate change, for instance, is not something that is in the distant future. It's upon us already. And this, obviously the same with pandemics, which I view as one particular aspect of health issues that are going to be, we're probably going to encounter more of as we approach on what was previously a domain of the wild. Our well-being is affected by what's happening in the world. And as psychotherapists, we're going to encounter this more and more so in our consulting rooms. And again, depending on where we place ourselves, our response is going to be different. Do I view this as a dysfunction? And then do I feel like their response needs to be remedied in some way? Do I try and fix it and eradicate this? Or on the other side, do I think this is a really adaptive response to a dangerous situation? What about the large percentage of people who don't feel affected? What's going on with them? Where do I place the disturbance, and where do I see it? What's going on that people, a large percentage of people say, no, I'm not particularly worried about this. And then a third locus would be the psychosocial field. Do I locate it there and say, well, yes, this individual person may talk to me about this, but maybe actually the dysfunction is in the field, in the ground. And then as psychotherapists, what are our tools? You mentioned that yourself. It's like, where do we go? These questions are not something that I discussed in my training, and yet I think they're one of the most important questions of our time.
Yeah. Bringing the outside world sort of into the therapy room, which I found quite exciting, or even into the practice itself. Like I had a fantasy when I was reading your work of sort of communal spaces that also take place perhaps at the therapy center, or, you know, because I do agree that therapy, you know, can be so insular and private, and of course it needs to be for the container. But yeah, I was just struck by that.
That's the question, does it?
Yeah.
And can the container also become a prison or too rigid?
Yeah, definitely.
And that's part of this dissolving of rigid structures. Maybe the derangement that is upon us is also upon our profession.
Definitely.
So what needs to crumble, what needs to fall in for us to reimagine and reinvent and maybe rediscover as well? And I love the fact that, you know, like, I don't have the answers. And I don't think that any individual can have the answers, not even any singular profession. I think we need to come together, and we may each hold one piece of the puzzle. And there's something that you will have access to that I won't. And it's only because we come together and we share our ideas, that something can emerge that is, bigger than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
There was something else I wanted to say, if I may, about
Of course.
why should we as psychotherapists step up to the current times.
Yeah.
And I think that our profession has been very focused on the individual, but that there's a real lack of the voice of what we may have to bring in the public discourse. So, as you said earlier, it's very much framed as climate change is very much framed as a technological issue, an economic issue, a political issue. I have not heard it framed very often as a psychological issue. It's been 50 years that we've known about climate change. And in the last 35 years, our CO2 emissions have grown exponentially. On our watch, in full view, we knew this. And so this is not a linear behavior. I can trace, I have the information, and so I change my behavior. And yet I think we still discuss the issue as though we just need the right way of communicating something, the right way of posing the problem. And I think the irrational, unconscious, wild, undomesticated, chaotic part of our human nature has been completely left out of the picture. And so we know a little bit about that. I think we know, for instance, that when we deal with addiction, that it's not just too much alcohol, right? We frame things like that.
Yeah, that's a great example.
When we talk about climate change, we talk about it's too much CO2 in the atmosphere. We need to reduce that. That's one part of what needs to happen. It's drinking less or not stop drinking.
Yeah.
That's not the whole picture, and it definitely doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
So I think that, I think we do have something important to say.
Lastly, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the upcoming seminar day. So again, for those of you watching, it's on November 7th, 10 to 3, and it will be on Zoom. What can we expect from it? And I guess what do you hope we'll take away from it?
10 to 3, right? We're going to solve it all in those few hours.
Exactly. We have 5 hours.
And
we are going to get down to business.
Exactly. Very much not. So I think I'd like to derange that a bit, because we live in a culture where we think about where we're quite accustomed to milking things, and where we don't put much value unless we can take something away. And so I'd like to flip that around and look at actually how can I give freely? How can I be of service? How might I be of service? How might my listening be of service to somebody else? How can I bring out an important question with somebody I'm going to talk to, or how can I be of service to the land I live on, or to my local river, or how can I be of service to somebody I haven't even met yet? So I'd like to change the perspective. And one of the things that I hope we can look at in that time, so it's going to be more experiential than me preaching, because as I said, I don't hold the answers. We need to come together, and we need to come together from a multiplicity of backgrounds, and infect each other with our ears, and not just with viruses, but with good stuff, and allow ourselves to be infected. What have we othered? What have we lost? What has become invisible to us? And that will be something different for you than it will be for me. And it's how can we honor this invisible other, and how can we remember it, or how can we meet it? And so I hope to make space for there to be enough containment so that we can take one little step into deranging territory, so that something I haven't seen before, something that hasn't nagged me before, something that hasn't made me angry before, or made me sad before, can enter me. And then it's about, how do I carry that into the world? What do I do with it? So I hope that as a community on that day, that we can allow there to be many more questions than answers. So that these, we take these questions into the world, rather than foreclosing all potential with, a really quick answer or a 5-step plan.
Yeah.
So that's my hope. But who knows what's going to emerge?
Yeah, yeah. Oh well, I loved hearing that, and
Good. So
yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this today, Steffi. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you on the 7th.
Thank you so much for this dialogue.